The moment the crew gets an 11th member, one of the Straw Hats will die. Hello my fellow weebs and welcome back to the One Piece saga. The series covering my never-ending journey of watching through One Piece for the very first time, giving my thoughts on it and ranking each arc in a tier list, to determine which is unquestionably, definitively, and definitely not just in my opinion, the best one. But today we have another post-arc, so based on previous experience, this time I readied myself for many a reveal to come. And oh boy, did we get some reveals. Though let's not get ahead of ourselves and take a quick look at how the tier list is looking right now. The recently covered Marineford easily took the top S spot. Though, will post-war repeat the case of post-Enies Lobby, or might this one buck the trends? Well, there's only one way to find out, so let us jump straight into post-war. This arc follows a really interesting structure that I don't think we really ever seen before, as we both jump around the world quite a bit, as well as back and forth in time. It very much feels like an arc that was designed to tie up all the loose ends in this first grand saga. But because this is One Piece we're talking about, it achieves that, but purposely brings up about 500 new questions. And I think you know me by now, I loved it. Though narrowing in on the story itself, we opened the arc with a few direct follow-ups of the war. Notably, us seeing how the entire thing was portrayed to the rest of the world, or rather wasn't portrayed, because it is very clearly a cover-up. From a narrative standpoint, this is basically exactly what I expected, especially with the same exact thing happening in Enies Lobby, though the implications here are obviously far bigger. Notably, with there being a clear divide as to which part of the message people actually heard. We hear that around the world, people are either cheering the heroic Navy's triumph, or the other half has been thrown into complete chaos as Whitebeard, one of the world's balancing pillars, was just killed. Not to mention him once again reminding the world that the One Piece is real. Keep in mind that the rest of the world believes that Whitebeard and Roger were mortal enemies, so the same exact words coming out of Roger's rival obviously carries a ton of weight. Though yes, similar to what I talked about way before this war even began, this sort of power vacuum story is one that I am all here for. I cannot wait to see the absolute chaos this brings in the new world, with Blackbeard seemingly being the harbinger of all of that. Following all that, we get yet another instance of Sussyman Doflamingo as we see him chase down Moria. It's implied that he's killed here, which I would be very happy about, but I am like 99.99% sure that he's alive. He's just going to start laughing and be so annoying that Doflamingo just leaves, so I don't think he's dead. Though the most interesting thing here is the brief exchange that we see between them. As Moria is chased down, Doflamingo claims that he was sent after him, so Moria suspects that it was Sengoku's command. Though Doflamingo corrects him by saying that it was someone higher up, meaning the world government? Two very important questions are raised here. Number one, why is Doflamingo suddenly a direct contact for them? And number two, why does anyone even care about Moria? As far as question one goes, I'd wager this is just another instance of Doflamingo earning IOUs with as many parties as he can, and then just seeing where they lead. I am 100% convinced at this point that he's going to turn out to be just as dangerous as Blackbeard or the Emperors themselves. It just seems like there's a lot more to him than we know, and seemingly he has a lot of contacts very high up. As to how he uses those contacts, that we're yet to see, but I'm guessing it's not going to be good for Luffy. And that makes me very nervous about Law chilling with Luffy right now. Though as for question 2, I honestly have no idea. Maybe they too think that Shallot is just too annoying, and I don't blame them. Still in Marineford, we cut to Sengoku where we learn of something even more terrifying than we just saw go down. We find out Blackbeard's process for picking his recruits. Put briefly, the madman just organized a battle royale in level 6 of Impel Down, from which the winners would join him. Oh boy, as if we didn't know he was powerful enough. But I'm guessing we haven't even seen what he's truly capable of, if these really are only the best of the best, or I guess worst of the worst. At this point, the only real way I see of his crew being defeated by anyone is it crumbling from within. As in they just don't know how to work together or will ultimately turn on each other. Though I do suppose that you can make an argument that there are more powerful crews out there simply by the nature of them never actually being caught, but still, Blackbeard's crew right now is dangerous to say the least, and we very much saw that in Marineford. But speaking of Sengoku, we get another scene that further cemented my idea of him being someone with the will of D. As once he's told that the world government is covering up the events of Impel Down as well, he outright yells that he does not care. This very much seems like a Garp thing to do, doesn't it? People are clearly in danger if they don't know that the world's most dangerous criminals are out there. But just to protect their reputation, the world government wants to cover that up. And so we see Sengoku go against that. Almost like there was an ancient war between these two sides, huh? Oh, and one thing I want to add here. I've seen a few people confused by what I mean when I say the inherited will. And to put it briefly, I just use the inherited will and the will of D interchangeably. So I don't mean the inherited will, as in Zoro's case, that it's Kuina's will that he's inherited. I rather just mean it's the inherited will of D. So whenever I say the inherited will, I do mean the will of D. I'll try to be better about just calling it the will of D to avoid confusion. So yes, I think Sengoku has the will of D. And I also think Koby has the will of D. Okay, and I have one more thing to mention. The music dude we saw back in Sabo AND thinks Law is sus too, but more on this in a bit. Luffy's awakening is what can only be described as very, very tragic. And if it wasn't for Jimbei, he would have probably ended up damaging his body beyond repair himself. And oh boy, seeing him just scream for everyone to go away and leave him alone was really rough. Especially because out of the Straw Hats, he has no one. In his mind, he couldn't protect anyone. He lost his crew in Sabo AND, and now his brother died in his arms. As far as Luffy's story goes, he has pretty clearly been set up for a major transformation. As we've been directly shown, he is not ready for the new world. So seeing him work through this struggle was, albeit not fun per se, but very interesting. And with that, we drift into the much-awaited Luffy flashback. But one question I have right away is how much filler does the anime add? Because I couldn't help but notice that some parts of the story we saw here, despite being fun, didn't really add anything. The guide I'm using says that it's just a few episodes in the middle, but it kind of felt weird in terms of how the arc flowed. But looking past that, what I want to bring up right away is Dadan and her transformation throughout this flashback. First off, please don't tell me Ace wore his necklace because of Dadan. Because if he did, I will be about 5% more sad. Though yeah, Dadan. She's your typical tough love type of character who constantly claims to hate children, but in actuality loves them and will support them in literally anything they do. Just like we see here. And yes, this was yet another instance of Oda somehow managing to get me attached to a character I've barely seen, and who half the time is almost comically evil toward Luffy and Ace. I really want to see Luffy reunite with Dadan at some point. She will obviously try to hide it, but I'd imagine she'd be extremely proud of what he's become and the friends he's gathered. Oh, and the scene of her going to check in on them in the middle of the night literally made my heart melt. Though following this, we see the very rocky start of Luffy and Ace's brotherhood, which came as a major surprise considering how close they seemed. Based on what we heard back in Marineford about Ace being Mr. Worldwide, seeing him basically try to kill Luffy for a few weeks really caught me off guard. Though obviously, he's just a kid who's grown up in not so great circumstances, so in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have been surprised. As far as their initial meeting goes, I think it went a long way towards cementing two things. Number one, as we've seen many times already, Luffy will go to the end of the world for someone who he believes to be his friend or ally. And number two, Luffy's pirate ambitions are about as deep-rooted as they can be. To elaborate on these, we literally just saw Garp tell Luffy that Ace is now his brother. And Luffy just immediately accepted that, no questions asked, and then proceeded to chase him around for literal weeks wanting to befriend him. If that isn't dedication, then I really don't know what is. But number two, even as far back as this, we already see him imitate Shanks in many situations, both in his interactions with Garp as well as with Ace later on. In a way, I think these particular points were kind of the core of what this flashback aimed to achieve. If we apply them to the present day, which we'll talk about a lot more in just a bit, Luffy realized that he isn't ready to protect his crew in the new world, so he dedicated himself to getting stronger, but never wavered in his dream. Even after standing face to face with all three of the admirals in Marineford, after holding his own brother's corpse, and even barely escaping death himself. So in a way, both to Luffy as well as to us, this was a reminder of who Luffy is. He will never give up on his friends, and he will never give up on his dream. But anyway, back to the story. It's here where we meet Sabo, and oh boy, the moment I saw him, I literally just wrote, he's so dead. I don't think I brought it up before, but we saw the whole sake thing, and Sabo conveniently wasn't a part of it. And this of course was a flashback. So my immediate thought was that yes, he is 100% dead, though as we'd see later in the arc, that is in fact not the case. Which brings me on to the curious question of why is he introduced here? Bringing him into the story directly following Ace's death, in my mind, implies that something about it was important to his character specifically. Which brings me on to my next major point, Sabo meeting Dragon. As I said, I'm not buying his death for a second, and I am 300% sure that he is now a revolutionary. Even looking at the symbolism, his flag burned so he never became a pirate, and instead was rescued by Dragon. Which makes me think that they are bound to come into the story very soon. Obviously, I did get my Marineford prediction completely and utterly wrong in that sense, but with the chaos the war has caused, isn't this like the perfect time for them to make a move? And while we're still talking about Dragon, there's one thing that finally made everything make sense. And that is this scene where we see both Eva and Kuma. So yes, him helping the crew in Sabo was not a fluke. The dude was a revolutionary. And with that said, the locations they were sent to suddenly make so much more sense. And a big old grand theory is a brewin'. As far as their locations go, I'm willing to bet that Dragon has kept tabs on Luffy and, by extension, the Straw Hats. So in Sabo, Kuma's interference was simply a convenient way to send them to the various locations best suited for their development. In my mind, it's absolutely no coincidence that Chopper landed on a location with tons of knowledge on medicine, Zoro literally in Hawkeye's backyard, etc. Though that then brings me onto the very interesting question of, was Dragon trying to make sure Luffy never reached Ace? Keep in mind he sent him to Amazon Lily, an island in the middle of the Calm Belt where men are pretty much killed on sight. Though, if he was trying to make the Straw Hats stronger, he wouldn't have tried to get Luffy killed. So maybe Amazon Lily was chosen because of their knowledge of Haki. He did awaken his conqueror spirit there after all, so in that sense, it worked. But is he really playing this sort of 5D chess? Even going as far as to predict that Luffy would end up in Marineford? I've gotta be honest, this was just yet another aspect of Dragon that has left me asking many questions and offered up absolutely zero answers. Okay, maybe like one answer, because we saw Kuma. It's pretty clear to me that Dragon is indeed making moves in the shadows, so I just want to see what they ultimately become. At this point, we seemingly have 3 masterminds in the series, which, to the best of my knowledge, conveniently represent totally different parties. Those of course being Dragon himself, Doflamingo, and Blackbeard. At this rate, I feel like my theories will reach a level of insanity unfit even for YouTube, but anyway. With Sabo now out of the picture, we see Luffy and Ace continue to get stronger to fulfill their promise of becoming pirates at the age of 17, just like Sabo wanted. I am still waiting for the obligatory Luffy and the crew saved by what is actually a revolutionary who's infiltrated the enemy type of scene, so maybe that's when we'll see him next? Well, either way, I guess I have a new thing to theorize about for around 400 episodes. But there's one last thing I want to mention here. We see Luffy saying that he wants at least 10 people on his crew. And here, I should put on my extra thick tinfoil, because this once again seems like a huge Chekhov's gun. I think I've brought it up before, but in case you're not familiar with the term, it originates from Anton Chekhov, who held the belief that each and every element of the story must be necessary, and that irrelevant ones should be removed. So in Chekhov's view, if a volcano exists in a story, it has to erupt. If it doesn't, it should have just been a regular mountain, because a volcano doesn't add anything of value. Normally, I wouldn't read into it too much, as some authors don't really abide by these sorts of technicalities, but Oda has already leveraged this very principle and has done it very consistently. Remember what I said about the Vivre cards and them showing the vitality of the holder? If Ace wasn't going to die, they didn't need to show the vitality of the holder, because in Chekhov's view, if it doesn't change anything, it's not important to the story, and so they should have just pointed you in the direction of the holder. And then remember Blackbeard being able to take away a person's power just by touching them. Again, sort of a weird addition to a black hole power, right? But it already plants the idea of there being more to it, and we all know how that ended. And so we apply that thinking here. Why would Luffy say an explicit number if it did not mean anything? So, I am making my prediction here and you heard it here first. The moment the crew gets an 11th member, one of the Straw Hats will die. I know I'm setting myself up for failure, as there could already easily be over 11 members on the crew right now in the present story, and I obviously don't know about it, but hey, that's the point of making predictions, right? I mean, we're in episode 500, and let's be real, each and every one of us has brought up the question of, will one of the Straw Hats ever die? And yes, I know Oda does not like killing off characters, etc, but adding this explicit line just seems like an idea that he has had to set up a massive event sometime far into the future. Because deaths so far have all had massive consequences, one of the crew dying would clearly be insane. So, is it really out of the range of possibility that this is an idea he's had for the endgame of One Piece and planted a seed here? Many authors have the major story beats figured out years ahead, and all that's left is to fill in the middle. So, could this be an instance of that? What if this is setting up the final confrontation of One Piece? Remember what I said about Koby being the peacekeeper? And remember my theory about the original war being reignited? Well, wouldn't this be the perfect catalyst? I'll let you think about that. Hello, Editing Korotos here. At this point, I know I'm taking it way too far, but hear me out. Look at Luffy's shirt. 5 plus 6 is 11. He is the 11th member. So yes, once the 10th member joins, Luffy is a goner. Heard it here first. Phew, Even I know that theory was bogus, but anyway, once we cut back to the present, we get what is a very, very extreme juxtaposition. We literally just saw Luffy being more dedicated and happy than ever as he began his pirate journey, only to see him now completely and utterly devastated. Just like in Sabo AND, this was such a far cry from what I've grown to expect from Luffy that the entire thing was just so much worse. Luffy has been defined by his unwavering drive, yet here, his spirit was truly broken. And again, if it wasn't for Jimbei, who knows what have happened to him. And speaking of which, I'm still not quite sure where to pin Jimbei. I kinda sorta feel like he might join the crew at some point, which I guess based on what we hear at the end of the arc would have to be on Fishman Island, but at the same time, I feel like he's more so a mentor type of character for Luffy, rather than someone who'd actually join him on his journey. While he clearly has massive respect for Luffy, I still can't quite picture him being a Straw Hat. He doesn't really have an explicit dream as the others do or anything like that, but I guess only time will tell. And before we continue with Luffy's story, we jump over to Dadan, and oh boy. Basically, we see Garp arrive, and it goes about as well as you'd expect. Also, side note, Makino is like literally the best character ever, right? Everyone involved is clearly devastated by Ace's death. But what stung the absolute most is that Dadan just cries saying that the one who's truly suffering here is Luffy. And worst of all, she says that not even knowing about what happened in Sabo AND. So she does not even know that he is truly alone right now. Though yeah, I really want to see Luffy reunite with Dadan at some point. And on a very similar note, we cut to the burial site of Ace and Whitebeard, where Shanks echoes the same sentiments. They may all be hurt, but the one who has it the worst is Luffy. And in a broader sense, I just enjoyed this scene as a final send-off to these two legendary characters, where fittingly, we see a massive crowd, all of whom have come to pay their respects. And yes, I will bring it up again, it's scenes like this that just make me think for the 500th time that the usual immortality we see has to be flipped on its head every now and then. In fact, if you remember how much I enjoyed Skypiea, it's scenes like this that in retrospect sort of make me want to move it down in the ranks, because there, we saw zero consequences for anyone. It was also this grand war for the Sky Island, but all those quote-unquote voices disappearing we heard meant nothing. Contrast that to this war, where two legendary characters lost their lives. But alright, I think I've gone on about this more than enough already, but I don't think there'll be anyone who'd say that, narratively speaking, Whitebeard, or Ace for that matter, should have survived. This is an end of an era, and yes, while their deaths hurt, this very much signals that. And speaking of which, we return to Luffy, who Jimbei has finally broken through to. After saying that he can't be trapped by doubts, Luffy begins to count his crewmates, and this was so bittersweet. The cinematography here was also top-notch, that darkness being shattered as Luffy sees his entire crew cheering for him was so wholesome, and the moment of him finally saying, "I have to meet them back on the ship," was like, yes, let's go. Luffy 2.0 is here. Though, little did I know, we were still far away from Luffy 2.0. But with that, we cut to everyone on the crew finally hearing the news of Luffy losing Ace. We won't go through all of them for the sake of time, but we'll briefly touch on what each of them are up to. Oh, and by the way, this is a bit of a nitpick I have with this arc. Some of these scenes felt a little jarring in the sense that they basically said the same exact thing. For example, when each of them read the newspaper, we just cycle through all of them as they read out the news. And if this appeared once, it'd be fine. But all the following times they get an update from Luffy or something like that, we again go through them one by one. Whereas I think it would have made just more sense to do a grid of all of them yelling out, "Yes, Captain," or something like that. Though yeah, that's a super minor nitpick with the anime version, and I obviously don't know how that looks in the manga. I'm now expecting about 500 more comments about how I should switch over to the manga because the pacing of the anime is horrible and it will only get worse. Chill out. I've already heard it about 50 million times, even as far back as the Arlong Park arc, so please, chill out. I will read the manga anyway. Though yes, moving into the individual stories, beginning with Zoro and HAWKEYE. This one really had me doing a double take. Obviously Zoro has Ghostgirl there with him, and I thought that would be it. He just trained against the baboons or something, but no. HAWKEYE just shows up out of nowhere. And like, imagine being Zoro. You get destroyed on Thriller Bark, then have the entire crew destroyed in Sabo, have to fight off countless baboons just to stay alive, and then hear that your captain's brother is dead from your mortal enemy. That must have been an interesting couple of days for sure. Though jokes aside, him showing humility to HAWKEYE and asking to train under him was absolutely awesome. The only thing I wish we could have seen is a little more of their dynamic. It was made pretty clear at Baratier that HAWKEYE has a lot of respect for Zoro, so I would have loved to see how that training actually went. Would Zoro be super respectful toward him? Or would HAWKEYE constantly egg him on about being weak, etc, etc? And like, how can you not show me another duel between them? Even if it was training, come on! Though regardless, I'm guessing Zoro will have leveled up big time by the next time we see him. All I hope is that we actually see him face off against HAWKEYE again. Obviously, I know the safe route for the story is to keep HAWKEYE at this god level through to the end of the series, but I don't care, I'm not writing the story, right? Just give me the fight, thank you very much. Next up, we have Chopper and his new bird and human pals. I did really enjoy the gag of him supposedly leaving after becoming good friends with everyone, but then returning after hearing from Luffy and trying to act super cool by wearing a disguise a la Sogeking. With how much Chopper actually looked up to Sogeking, that one gave me a good laugh. As for his progression, I think it's quite a bit more difficult to showcase knowledge rather than just pure power. So I'm curious to see how different he'll become once we see him again. Okay, and I've gotta admit, the shot of poor old Chopper standing there and thinking back to all they've been through was probably the closest One Piece has gotten to cracking me. Him screaming out that he doesn't care if people are afraid of him, if Luffy needs his help, he can become a real monster was like, why One Piece? Why do you do this to me? And then that scene of them sleeping was just so cute. At this point, I know my favorite characters keep constantly cycling, but Chopper is definitely up there. Please don't ask me to rank them though, I'll have to spend like 3 weeks thinking about it. As for Usopp'n, I'm guessing he'll be a sort of a mix between Zoro's and Chopper's progression, in that he'll acquire a whole bunch of new special attacks, rather than just becoming purely stronger. Oh, and he probably won't be a Chungus anymore. Though yeah, with the island they're on, I think we're going to see some very creative new shenanigans from him. Oh, and side note, I also felt like his story had a little more emotional baggage. I don't know why, but I think his reaction to hearing about Luffy was even more so, oh, I need to reach him like right now, than the others. That may totally be just me, but especially once he felt sorry about just sitting there while Luffy was fighting a war, really seemed a tad more intense in terms of emotion. Except Chopper, of course. That little dude is doing even worse. As for Nami, her story was sort of 50-50 for me. I can't even pin down the reason why, but it seemed almost too straightforward. The moment she landed there was zero mystery. She just got to learning about weather right away, and that's that. And yeah, I don't even know what else to say here. It wasn't bad, but it just was. I suppose for the whole high-tech research vibe, that sort of setting is needed, but I think it was a little too clear-cut, if that makes sense. So yes, I don't really have anything else to add, it was just super straightforward. Though next up, we have another super interesting one. We see that Robin and the bridge building country, which is still a super creative premise by the way, has had dragons revolutionaries arrive and save Robin. I'll be honest, I've got literally no idea what to expect from her once we see her again. For the rest of the crew, there was a pretty clear goal, but with Robin, it's never really said what the aim of her meeting with Dragon is going to be about. But I cannot wait to hear what she learns there, like, seriously. Might she just return and start dropping some bombshells on us, like, I don't know, hey Luffy, Dragon's fruit power is actually literally being the Avatar. That's how he saved you in Logtown. Oh yeah, I know I wasn't there, I just traveled back in time and saw it, don't worry about it. Oh, and I'm your mother. Next up, we have Franky, and if I were to sum it up in as few words as possible, I'd just say, what the f***? Him literally nuking the entire island and then being like, oh yeah, it's no big deal, was like, what? But with him snooping around Vegapunk's lab, he's bound to find something interesting, so I'm fully expecting some new mods big time. Who knows, maybe he'll even find something to later incorporate into the Sunny when they get back to Sabo AND. So honestly, with him being in Vegapunk's lab, I think there are nearly infinite possibilities as to what he might find. I wouldn't even be surprised if he comes back knowing how to feed fruits to objects. In fact, it literally appears to be one of the first papers he picks up. So who knows, maybe soon everyone on the crew will be wielding weapons with devil fruit powers. Next up, we have Sanji. Though I'll be honest, a good 90% of what he does was seriously overshadowed by Eva's arrival and them getting a call from Baltigo saying that Dragon's making a move. Like, how can I not be excited about that? Especially with everything that just went down in Marineford. So yeah, sorry Sanji, you're not really the focus here. Though as far as his training goes, it appears to be a mix of him learning some Kenpo while trying to acquire their recipes. Seems fairly straightforward, so not much to add there. All I want is more info on Dragon, please. And finally, we have Brook, who, I'll just say it right now, even more so than with Robin, I've got literally zero clue as to where his story might go. Like, genuinely. He acts as the devil for a while, then is kidnapped by those two joint people, and like, what does his training arc look like? Though with that said, his inner dialogue was super heavy in the emotions department. That line of, I can't explain how bright you look to me, because 50 years of waiting for a miracle paid off at that moment. Seriously hit hard. Not to mention that just as he joined the crew, they were defeated and once again he lost his friends. That's super messed up. So yeah, I'm super curious what we're going to see from him in the future. But with the wholesome and sometimes sad moments out of the way, we cut right back to some serious business going on in the new world. First of all, at Marie Joie, we get the confirmation that no one in history has eaten 2 fruits except for Blackbeard. And if anyone would know, it's probably the Elder Stars. So I do take this as a legit confirmation that he is the first. However, they explicitly say that no one has eaten 2 fruits, not necessarily that no one has had 2 powers. But I admit, that might be semantics. And again, I still stand by my theory that Blackbeard didn't steal just the fruit power, he stole Whitebeard's soul. But anyway, we could talk about that for hours. What's more important here is that we see Blackbeard defeat Bonnie, one of the captains we saw back in Sabo AND. Though he does a runner as Akainu arrives, who then goes on to speak to Bonnie himself. And like, what's the deal with him saying it almost made his blood freeze once he heard Bonnie escape the government? Does she have something to do with the government? Escaping an admiral is definitely something worth noting, so what's up with that? If we turn to history, Anne Bonny is very well known for her mysterious disappearance, and sources of her death are often conflicting. So, is this in some way referencing that? Well, regardless, this was seriously one of those show up, say something important, refuse to elaborate times. Though in terms of Blackbeard, as far as I gather, his goal is pretty much just to go around knocking out crew after crew and looking for even more crewmates, which definitely does not sound good for the Straw Hats. We then cut over to the Navy, where we basically get a confirmation of my suspicions in Marineford. The trauma caused by the war has awakened Koby's Haki. In his case, that's the mantra. And I suppose this makes sense retroactively as well. Luffy's first full-on use of the Conqueror's Haki was after they got wiped out in Sabo AND. Though that then brings me back to that anime-only scene of Zoro. That would have made sense there too, due to his traumatic experience on Thriller Bark with the whole nothing happened moments. I don't have the exact comments, but one of you mentioned that some of the filler in the anime is in fact a cheeky addition that's included at Oda's request. So again, I do not know if this is in fact canon, but in my eyes, it makes perfect sense for Zoro to have Conqueror's Haki in this case as well. Or rather, it's just a confirmation that he has it, and it was unlocked after Thriller Bark. But I have gotten conflicting info regarding these scenes, so I'm not sure whether it's just a filler as a joke, or perhaps it's filler that actually carries more meaning, as I talked about in the Sabo AND video originally. But anyway, I guess I'll just wait for a confirmation. And with that said, it's pretty clear that Koby was changed a lot by Marineford. Everything from stepping up to an admiral to facing off against Luffy. It's definitely worth keeping in mind that it's not just going to be the Straw Hats that are getting stronger now. Koby's getting a training arc of his own, so I cannot wait to see how that goes for him. We then finally return to Luffy, where we see Rayleigh appear. Though the very first thing I want to bring up is Law's sudden departure. What's up with that? I still can't help but think about his flag and its connections to Doflamingo, and assuming Rayleigh knows more than me, and on top of that, remembering what we heard at the very top of this arc with the musician dudes, this is very suspicious. I admit, I might just be paranoid at this point. I mean, despite my initial reservations, Law did indeed save him and nurse him back to health, but I still think something is off. Why did he do that in the first place? If he was indeed under Doflamingo, maybe he too is gathering up IOUs to leverage later? Or maybe he's trying to buy trust to exploit later? I really don't know, because so far he appears to be a really cool and chill dude. But that symbol. Oh, and because a few of you have mentioned this, yes, I know that their symbols are not identical. It's just the similarity that worries me. If you remember what I said about the Chekhov's gun principle, they're similar for a reason, and anything, whether good or bad to do with Doflamingo, is a big red flag in my eyes. So yes, one might be crossed out, but it's crossed out for a reason. Flags are usually super personal, and in their case, they are so similar. To be totally honest with you, I wouldn't even be surprised if they're related in some way. Because again, it's a flag, it symbolizes something, it's very personal. And you don't just copy someone else's flag because you really don't like them. So yes, I am very suspicious, but I like Law, but I'm suspicious and I need to know more. Anyway, we see that Rayleigh swam here, which was like, okay, he's a Chad. But then he asks whether Luffy really wants to return to Sabo AND. And the episode here ended on a cliffhanger. And this time, I can 100% say that I was indeed just being paranoid. My instant thought was that Luffy is being turned into a pawn. I legit thought Rayleigh is trying to manipulate Luffy into becoming the king of the pirates, not because he wants to help him, but because he wants to control him in some way. Obviously, I think, that was completely and utterly wrong, and I'm sorry for doubting the absolute Chad that Rayleigh is. But then I got to thinking about the idea as a whole. How have we gone 500 episodes without Luffy's trusting and almost naive nature being exploited? I think it's about time I start to get wary of overly friendly characters. Luckily, I was wrong about Rayleigh, he's way too cool to betray Luffy, but I think we might encounter someone equally friendly with less pure intentions sometime soon. So I've got my guard up, that's for sure. And Rayleigh, I've got my eye on you. You better not exploit my boy Luffy while he's alone. Though with that, Luffy returns to Marineford of all places and basically pulls the biggest "stop me if you can" in history. They do a funeral at sea and then legit land on the island itself and ring the Ox Bell. Later, of course, we'd find out that the bell signifies the start of a new era, and oh boy, this is definitely that. Though he then calmly walks into Marineford itself and peacefully mourns, all the while having the secret tattoo a la Ace's design, letting the crew know that they shouldn't meet back up in 3 days, but rather 2 years. What? Unfortunately, the existence of a time skip was spoiled for me just before I actually saw it happen. I just happened to see pre and post time skip being mentioned a whole bunch in the comments, and it didn't take much for me to piece together that this is what people were talking about. Though what came as a surprise, even when I saw it, is the duration of it. When I last talked about this sort of thing, I asked all of you how long has it been since Luffy began his journey. And based on what you told me, it's been roughly 2 to 3 months. So, let me just visualize what this means. 2 years is insane. Luffy went from Gum Gum Pistol to Gear 2 and 3 in the space of these 3 months. What will he do in 2 years? Gear 55? But alright, let's get through the rest of this arc and we'll talk about what this may mean in a bit. We then cut to Buggy, who receives a letter from the world government of all places, and like, what is this? Please don't tell me this is what Moria's supposed disappearance is. If Buggy becomes a warlord, I will literally flip. Based on the events of Marineford, it does actually make sense. He was the one who, albeit accidentally, filmed the entire thing go down, so it may just be a case of them wanting to have control over Buggy, especially because it is now known that he was a member of Rogers' crew. So for the rest of the world, this would seem like a major W for the Navy, since they now have an ex-Roger pirate basically under their thumb. And all of my Buggy salt aside, I do suppose this could be interesting with this whole trickery angle, but please don't overdo it again. You don't need to remind me 50 million times that Buggy is Chaos Incarnate. I already know that. Just make him do something interesting. Don't make him stupid for the sake of being stupid 40 times. But anyway, we also get a scene with Buggy that I don't even know what to think of. It appears to be a joke, but is it? Buggy casually says that Rayleigh could be Luffy's uncle. Like, what? Luffy's family tree right now is seriously giving me sleepless nights. This doesn't really have any groundbreaking implications, aside from making me loop back to a theory that I'm not sure if I've actually brought up before, but it's basically just that some people in the world of One Piece are destined to meet. Though that is a complete shot in the dark, and it is basically just a trope. And yes, finding out Luffy's family situation is like navigating a minefield at this point. But with that, Luffy parts way with Jimbei, with them agreeing to meet in Fishman Island in 2 years. And then with everyone else apart from Rayleigh, who'd be working as his instructor. And with that said, Rayleigh begins to explain what Luffy has to master. My favorite line here was probably the, yeah, most people can only ever master one. You'll need all 3. But anyway, we finally get a formal description of all 3 forms of Haki. Or rather, supposedly all 3. Observation, armament, and the rarest form, Conquerors. And importantly, we hear that only the first 2 can be trained. The third is the spirit of the wielder himself. And oh, the implications of this are truly insane. I already talked about this back in Amazon Lily in relation to Blackbeard, but now that we finally know exactly what these Haki forms do, my mind is seriously racing with possibilities, especially with Luffy's fruit power. Imagine him using armament Haki while already being made out of rubber. That's like defense plus 500, right? Not to mention Luffy properly mastering observation. He doesn't need to be fast anymore. He can just predict what they'll do. And 2 years! Years! I think this is a very fitting moment for me to echo what I said in the very first video in this series. I'm glad that our protagonist is extremely OP already. Clearly, we all know how that comment aged, But is that what we're going to see replicated post-time skip? Is Luffy seemingly going to be a god, yet still get decimated by enemies in the new world? 2 years is a lot, but everyone has those 2 years. And people like Blackbeard are already ahead of Luffy. But I suppose this is an end of an era. Or rather, a beginning. I've got no clue what levels of hype people had when this was originally coming out. I mean, hearing that the characters wouldn't meet each other for 2 years is, again, insane. But trust me when I say, I really want to go and continue watching right now. But not before what might just be the best scene in this entire arc. Luffy hanging up the Straw Hats. Now this was most definitely worthy of a platinum grade chef's kiss. And I think it just goes to show how much meaning Oda has managed to pack into these seemingly small scenes. And on that note, I shall see you all in 2 years. And that's the video. Kidding. You're not getting rid of me that easy. And that's post-war, and that is also the pre-time skip saga. Oh man, this feels really weird. We're slowly coming up on a year since the series started, and this feels like a massive milestone that I'm super grateful I got to share with all of you. But anyway, all the sappy things aside, let's get to the ranking. I honestly found this one quite tricky to rank, mostly because of how it changed my thoughts regarding previous arcs, most of all Skypiea. I'm seriously starting to get the feeling that I'll be re-ranking everything sometime soon, but for now, post-war will be taking a very respectable mid-A tier and pushing down Skypiea an entire tier down to B. The permanence of this arc is what stuck out to me the most. And while I do think fleshing out Ace's character before his death might have been an even better way of going about it, I did still seriously enjoy the audience taking Luffy's perspective in remembering why he keeps going and why he is the person he is. I also think the introduction of Sabo so late feels a bit weird, especially with everything Luffy has been through already, and we haven't even gotten a single mention of him so far, though at the same time, he also never mentioned Ace before Alabasta, so I guess that tracks. But yeah, regarding Sabo, I think I'll be able to make up my mind a little better when we actually see him next. Because right now, his character is seriously a bit of a weird case. And of course, there's still the mystery surrounding the rest of the crew, which I honestly think I've glossed over way too quickly, but TLDR, in a weird way, I think I'm even more excited about the story now than I even was with Marineford. But at the same time, I almost have this feeling of not wanting to catch up, because so far, the series has seemed nearly infinite, and with this massive milestone, that feeling is seriously fleeting. But with all of my introspective therapy out of the way, it is time for our crew to get stronger and finally return to Sabo D. And that's the video. No long outro for this one, it already turned out to be absolutely massive. Though as always, I do want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my ramblings, so seriously, thank you. And if you wish to join the highly coveted Mystery Shack Insiders Club, you can do so for as little as $1 per month. Though with that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.